Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at German society from 1871 to 1913. Let's begin. So from 1871 to 1913, Germany is a class-based society, and it's a very divided class-based society. And it's divided into these. So you've got the Kaiser at the top, naturally, then you've got the Junkers, the old landowners, old money. You've got the new industrialists, they're new money, rich people who own factories. Then we've got managers, white-collar workers, urban working, and rural working. And the divide is actually mostly on rural and urban. See, in 1871, 63.9% of the population was rural, but by 1910 it was only 40%. So like I mentioned in the previous video, there is mass urbanization going on. And at this point as well, women hold a very traditional role. It's the sort of classic, women belong at home. They're just going to, look after the children. They are allowed at this period, if you're sort of well off and you've got maybe servants in the house, women of upper class can sort of go out and do charity work, that type of stuff. But that's really all they can do. But by 1914, there are some sort of jobs beginning to emerge, mostly office work, the stuff you'd normally expect. And that sort of image of what women should do begins to sort of shatter during this period. However, in rural areas, surprisingly, women actually play a major role. They work the fields with the men. They work, the same sort of jobs as men in rural areas. And that's mostly because people would need all the hands they can get in rural communities. They can't really just work on their own. And so there's, again, this sort of rural-urban divide where urban women wouldn't really do much, but rural women do a lot more. And the SPD and August Bebel, who is the sort of main person amongst the SPD other than Ebert, at this point do campaign to allow for women to vote, but they fail. And to be honest, it's unsurprising to see why. It's, the idea of feminism and the female vote doesn't really come about until after World War One with the Weimar Republic, where sort of things are based upon, liberty. Because at Germany, again, this time very much class-based, Juncker sort of ruled, Camarillo, Kaiser, that type of stuff. So any sort of version of feminism at the time would have really sort of failed. Same as you would see as the suffragette movement is after World War One is when things begin to sort of pick up, and that's what we'll look at later. But the main thing is there's a mass culture of militarism in Germany, as every man, like I mentioned in the previous video, is required to serve in the army. And after their service, they are forced to work in the reserves. And that would essentially mean that in a time of war, like I mentioned in the previous video, they are called upon in case the main German army is sort of shattered or, they need extras, reserves, sort of acting like rearguard mostly. And at this time, it's also very much like the British army at the time. You're not going to really get anywhere in the German army as a civilian, as an ordinary man. If you're sort of Junker or perhaps the son of a new industrialist, a bit of an upper class position, the higher you're going to get in that sort of position in the German army. And that is really the way the problem is for the German army, is there's descriptions of, Junker officers being able to kind of get away with whatever. And that is actually most noted in the Zaben affair. Now, the Zaben affair occurred in 1913. An officer basically insulted some recruits. He went to military prison for a few days, but he didn't really spend much time there because, again, he was an officer. And then the German army went in and essentially brutally wiped out these protests. They don't kill anyone, but they charge in, they beat people. It's very bad. And Wilhelm II loves the military, so he's all for this militaristic action. And this does actually cause some degree of, friction between the Kaiser and the people because it's, showing him essentially brutally suppressing people. And, this is one of the reasons why by 1913, 400,000 French civilians who were living in German areas that were controlled by the German Empire have left. But the German army at this point is the dominant force. By 1914, it has a strength of arm of 4 million men-at-arms. So those are currently serving members. And it's the largest in Europe at the time. And it has 60 million on average a year by 1914. And like I mentioned, the Zaben affair sort of shows this uglier side of the German army that the people don't really want to think about. But for workers, their lives did actually improve. Between 1895 and 1913, real wages rise by 25%, which is a massive increase when you consider that they wouldn't have been paid much. There are no wage controls at this period. There is no minimum wage. And state socialism did actually help a lot. As we mentioned, Bismarck introduced state socialism, and it's kind of expanded again by Caprivi. But the main ones are in 1883, there's medical insurance, by 1884, accident insurance, and by 1889, old age pensions. And then, like I said, Caprivi does expand things. And by 1914, 15 million people are covered by medical insurance, and 28 million had accident insurance. However, only 1 million people were actually receiving an active pension at the time. But overall, there is a really large change in society in Germany at this period. So that's going to cover a sort of brief overview of German society at this period. I hope you've enjoyed.